Hi friends, welcome back to Azure Content YouTube channel. This is part 21 in SQL Real-Time Scenarios playlist. In this video, we are going to unpivot the table in SQL by dynamically fetching the source column names. So what I mean by this is we have a pivoted table, which means we have a source table where we have different columns. One is employee ID and there are multiple month names columns. Okay. Now, these are the sales amount for each of the employee ID in the month of Jan, in the month of Feb, and so on. Now, what we did in previous video is we have unpivoted this table and we have converted the columns into row values. As you can see, for each of the employee ID, the corresponding amount and the corresponding months are converted into row values, which means it has actually done ungrouping and it has converted single row into multiple rows. So basically converting the column into rows. Now the thing is, in the previous video we used the hard-coded values or the hard-coded column names from the source table, and then we converted into rows by using unpivot operator. Now in this video our aim is to convert this into a dynamic SQL query so that we do not need to hard code any values in the source column names here. And the advantage for doing that is, suppose in this source table there is another column getting added for another month, then we do not need to change anything here in this query, and we do not need to explicitly add on to the column names. And similarly, if there is any removal of columns from the source table, we do not need to touch the query. We can directly run the dynamic query so that it will fetch the column list from the source, and dynamically it will generate the rows in the destination, that is unpivoted table. Okay, so let's start writing the SQL query in order to make this query dynamic. Okay, so first of all, what we need to do is we need to fetch out all the column names from the source table. So in order to do that, there are some inbuilt tables that we can make use of. So if I use those tables, for example, select star from say sys.tables. Okay, you can see there is something called system.tables. Okay, if I run this, you can see all the table names present in this AdventureWorks database. Okay, and these are the corresponding object ID present for each of the tables. Okay, and if you see our table, which is pivoted SQL data that we are going to use in this video, is also having an object ID. So basically, if a table is present in your SQL database, then it will be attached to a object ID associated to it. If the table is not present, then the object ID will be null. So keeping that in mind, if I want to get all the column names of this particular table, then it will not be present in sys.tables table. It will be present in another table which is called sys.columns table. Okay, so if I show you sys.columns, you can see there is an object ID and then there is name of the columns. So if I scroll down, it has all the columns for all the tables. We are not concerned with all the columns here. We are just concerned with the columns of pivoted SQL data table. Okay, so in order to get only those columns which are present in pivoted SQL data, what we can do is we can either join these two tables and we can get only those column names present in this table. For example, if I say, suppose if I give an alias to this and then if I do inner join with sys.columns on the common column between these two tables is object ID. Okay, so if I give t dot object underscore ID equals to c dot object underscore ID, where t dot name equals to, you can see the table name here is pivoted SQL data. Okay, and if I run the whole query, you can see the output is having 9 rows, and instead of fetching all the unnecessary columns, let me just take the table name and the column name. So for both the tables, name is the column which is holding the relevant data. So that's what I have fetched out. So you can see This is the table name, and these are the column names coming out of sys.columns table. So the column name for both are looking same. Let me give an alias as table name, and here we can give as column names. Okay, so you can see for this table, these are the columns present in the AdventureWorks database for pivoted SQL data. Okay, so these are the column lists that we can get dynamically by using this particular query, where we have joined these two tables on the basis of object ID. Okay, uh, instead of doing this, that is, instead of joining this table, what we can do is we can simply use select star from sys.columns, where object ID equals to object ID of this pivoted SQL data. Okay, so if I run this, we will be getting all the column names. So instead of star, we can get name as column names. So if I run this, it will basically give the column names as expected. So instead of joining these two tables, what I can do is I can just get it from column table, sys.columns table, where by applying the where condition, where object ID is matching the object ID of this table. Okay, basically the object ID for any of the table is constant throughout the database. It will not change. Once you create the table, it will be having the same object ID until and unless it is deleted. So if I select the object ID of this table, okay, so if I select this, it will be constant value. So that's why we are not joining these two tables, and we are still getting the column names. Okay, so this query we will be making use of to get the column names for the source table. Okay, so now as you can see, this is our unpivot query that we had framed in the previous video, and our motto is to replace this value, the hard-coded values, to a dynamic column list. Okay, so if you see in this column list, we do not have employee ID column, right? So we can modify this. Let me first remove this query, and the query from which we will be getting the column names, here we can modify it and say where object ID equals to object ID, and also we can say that where name is not equals to employee ID. So it will eliminate this particular column name from the list of columns, so that we can get only the month's name that we require. Okay, because employee ID will not be considered in the month name. It is already present in the pivoted table. So we are not explicitly generating it when we are unpivoting it, right? So let me execute it now. You can see now we have eliminated the employee ID column, and we are just getting 8 column names. Now we have to convert it into this format by performing string aggregate on top of it. Okay, so let me use string underscore aggregate function, and we will be using comma separator. Okay, so comma will be acting as a delimiter here, so that we will be able to get all the values in a single string like this. Okay, so if I run this, I am expecting that this value will be converted into comma separated value like this. Okay, so let me execute it. So you can see it has aggregated all the rows and converted into a single string by separating it with comma. Okay, now there is a difference between this output and the column name that we have hard coded here, right? The order of this column names is actually sorted in alphabetical order, and here it is sorted in chronological order. So we have already seen in previous video, if we want to sort it by the calendar month, then we can use something called within group, which is usually leveraged with string aggregate function. Okay, so within group, if you want to sort something, then we can make use of within group keyword, and here inside within group we can order by, and we have already seen we had used date part function to order by the month name in calendar. Okay, so date part will be basically fetching out the month number out of the month name, and here we are giving month as the first argument, and then we will be passing the value that we want to sort. So it is present in this name property or name column. But in order to use the date part, in the second operator, we need to provide the full date. That means month and then date and year as well. So let me cast it as date time, and this will be getting the month name, uh, that is April, August, December, all of these. And let me cast it as date time. And before doing that, let me concatenate it with a sample value. Okay, let me give 01 2025. Okay, so if I run this now, it will be sorting this whole value in chronological order. That means Jan, Feb, March, April, May, August, September, and this December. Okay, so let me execute it now. So you can see the sorting has been performed, and this is what we needed to replace here in the hard-coded value. So this whole query we will be keeping in a variable, and that variable will be replaced here. Okay, so what we will be doing is, let me scroll it, and here we will start writing the dynamic query. Okay, so first of all, let me declare a variable, declare column list. Okay, and let me give it an varchar data type and varchar of max, and then let me also declare a SQL variable which is also an varchar max data type. And why we are declaring it is to store the unpivoted query, so that we can run this query by using sp underscore execute SQL stored procedure. That is an inbuilt stored procedure. Okay, so first of all, we will be using this variable and storing this data into this column list variable. Okay, so let me use select, then variable name equals to, and here let me remove select, we don't require that. Okay, so now this variable will be holding the value coming out of this query. So if I try to print the value in this variable, let me try that. Let's execute it. Okay, so it is saying incorrect syntax here. So let me remove this alias. We don't require that. And we will be simply using this query because we have removed select, right? So we don't require alias there. We have removed select from here. We are just assigning whole data into this variable. Okay, so let me execute it now. Yeah, now you can see it is having the correct data stored in this variable column list, right? Now our motto is to replace this hard-coded value with this particular variable. So in order to do that, I will be taking this whole query and storing it into SQL variable. Okay, so let me again use select, and then inside this SQL variable as a string we will be storing this whole query. Okay, and now instead of this hard-coded value, let me just end this string here and then concatenate with this particular variable, that is column list, and then again concatenate and create this string as a varchar, right? So I added the single quotes here and ended it here. So basically this dynamic variable will be taking the value after executing this particular query, and it will be actually fetching out the list of months and providing the same data here. Okay, so after executing this query using the SP, we will be basically converting it into the same format uh, which we had created in the previous video using hard-coded values. So now simply we will be using the sp underscore execute SQL. So we will be executing that sp using exec command, sp underscore execute SQL, and here we will be providing the SQL query that we want to run. So that SQL query is stored in @SQL variable. So now if I run the whole command or the whole SQL query, you can see we are able to perform the unpivoting of data. Okay, and moreover, we have not given any hard-coded values of column list. We have fetched it out of the source table, that is pivoted SQL data table, and we have dynamically generated it using the variables. Okay, so we have achieved this requirement of generating the dynamic SQL query by making use of sys.columns. So now we can verify the output we have got 24 rows, and it is the same records that we were expecting, and basically this is the same output that we got when we were hard coding the column list. So you can see there are 8 rows for each of the employee ID, where we have converted the column names, that is Jan, Feb, March, and so on, into corresponding rows for each of the employees. So we have performed the unpivoting using dynamic SQL query. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you find this video helpful. In order to get this query, you can see the description of the video. I'll be sharing the whole query in the description. So if you like the video, please hit on like button and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done it yet. Thank you.